the final spin. Harold Mitchell stood in his living room, surrounded by towering shelves of vinyl records, each album a chapter in the story of his 78 years. The morning light filtered through dusty windows, catching the metallic glint of the vintage turntable that had been his constant companion for over 5 decades. Today was moving day. The retirement home brochure lay open on the coffee table, its glossy pages promising comfort and care. But for Harold, it felt like the end of an era. His arthritis-gnarled hands trembled slightly as he picked up the first record, Glenn Miller's In the Mood, the same album that had played at the dance where he'd met his late wife, Margaret. As the familiar notes filled the room, Harold closed his eyes, transported back to 1962. He could almost smell Margaret's perfume, feel the warmth of her hand in his as they swayed on the dance floor. A smile tugged at his lips, even as a tear threatened to escape. "One last dance, old girl," he murmured to the empty room, his feet shuffling in a slow, careful rhythm. When the song ended, Harold gently lifted the needle and moved to the next album. And so began his journey through time, one record at a time. He played through the 60s, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. Each song brought back a flood of memories. His and Margaret's first apartment, the birth of their daughter Emily, summer holidays and festivals. As lunchtime approached, Harold's neighbor, Sarah, poked her head in. She'd been helping him pack, concerned about the old man living alone. "Mr. Mitchell, I brought some sandwiches. How's it going in here?" Harold looked up, momentarily disoriented. "Oh, Sarah, thank you, dear. I'm just saying goodbye, I suppose." Sarah's eyes softened as she took in the scene. Dozens of albums spread out, the turntables spinning, and Harold looking both lost and found in the music. "Why don't you tell me about some of these while we eat?" she suggested, settling onto the worn sofa. And so, between bites of tuna salad, Harold shared stories. He told her about the Woodstock album he'd bought on a whim, having never attended but wishing he had. He showed her the rare pressing of a jazz album that Margaret had surprised him with on their 20th anniversary. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself captivated by the rich tapestry of Harold's life, woven through with melodies and lyrics. She helped him sort through the 70s and 80s, laughing at his disco phase and teasing him about his brief flirtation with punk rock. Emily went through a rebellious phase, Harold explained with a chuckle. "I thought if I could understand her music, I could understand her. Didn't work, but I did discover I had a soft spot for the Clash." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Harold reached for a particularly well-worn album, Ella Fitzgerald's Purella. "This was Margaret's favorite," he said softly. "We played it every anniversary." As Ella's rich voice filled the room, Harold's eyes misted over. Sarah watched as he mouthed the words to Our Love Is Here to Stay, lost in memories of a love that had indeed stayed until the very end. When the song finished, Harold sighed deeply. "I suppose that's it, then. Time to pack these away." Sarah hesitated, then spoke up. "Mr. Mitchell." "Harold, why are you getting rid of all these? Surely there's room for some of them at Sunnygrove?" Harold shook his head. "They said I could bring a few, but it's all or nothing with these. Each one is a piece of my life. How can I choose?" An idea began to form in Sarah's mind. What if you didn't have to choose? "My son, he's opening a cafe downtown. What if we set up your turntable and records there? You could visit at any time, play whatever you want, and others could enjoy them too." Harold's eyes lit up for the first time in days. "You mean it? They wouldn't mind an old man's music collection? Are you kidding? Vinyl is making a huge comeback. The kids these days love this stuff. It would be like a living museum of music history." Over the next few days, as Harold prepared for his move, he and Sarah worked out the details with her son, Jake. The young man was thrilled at the idea, already envisioning themed nights and listening parties. On Harold's last night in his old home, he played one final record, Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. As the gentle notes drifted through the now empty room, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The next afternoon, Harold walked into Jake's cafe, leaning on his cane. The sight that greeted him brought tears to his eyes. His beloved turntable sat in a place of honor, surrounded by shelves of his carefully curated records. A small plaque read, "Harold's Vinyl Voyage, 5 Decades of Music History." Jake approached, grinning. Ready to play our first song, Mr. Mitchell? Harold nodded, running his fingers lovingly over the albums before selecting one. As the music started, a group of young people looked up with interest. Hey, cool tune. What is this? One asked. Harold smiled, settling into a comfortable chair. Well, let me tell you about the summer of 1965. And so began the next chapter of Harold's life. 3 times a week, he would visit the cafe, sharing his music and stories with a new generation of listeners. His records, instead of gathering dust in storage, continued to spin, filling the air with melodies both old and new. In the end, Harold realized it wasn't about holding on to the past, but about keeping it alive by sharing it with others. And as he watched young couples swaying to the same songs he and Margaret had danced to all those years ago, he knew that in some small way, their love story and all the others held within those grooves would play on.